So what is heathenry? Heathenry is the following of Germanic gods, or the Norse gods, like Thor, Odin, and Heimdall, and it can also be called Asatru.
Is there a difference between folk and inclusive heathenry? Yes, it's the easy tell of a white supremacist group. Folk refers to a specific community, and in this case, German-descended white people. Inclusive means if you hear the call of the gods and you're accepting of others, you are accepted. So if you're thinking about joining a heathen group and aren't sure if they're a white supremacist group, look for the word folk, because that's a guarantee they are a white supremacist group. The Poetic Edda is a collection of poems written in Old Norse containing the characters and events of Norse mythology. It pretty much served as the basis for all Norse myths. There is no creation story for runes in the Poetic Edda. Runes just always existed before anything else was created. They were just there. The runes were written on Yggdrasil, a sacred tree that holds the 9 worlds of the cosmos together. Runes have incredible power. Understanding the meanings of runes was considered a status symbol. Stories warn against the use of runes if you are not a master. If used incorrectly, there are harsh, unintended consequences. One story tells of how a man's wife was severely sick. He carved the runes into the side of her bed to try and help her heal quickly, but instead it made it much worse. A visitor that was a master of runes noticed the man's mistakes and fixed them. The woman soon recovered. Odin the All-Knowing, or the Self-Mutilator. Odin was obsessed with learning. He wanted to know everything. His 2 ravens were even named Thought and Memory. Odin is known as the one-eyed god, but he wasn't always that way. Mimir, the god of wisdom, gained his wisdom by drinking from the well of wisdom daily. Odin wanted in on that insight, so he made a deal with Mimir. He had to scoop out his own eye in exchange for 1 drink of the well. This newfound wisdom wasn't even enough for Odin. He wanted to understand the mystery behind runes. The English translation for rune is actually secret or mystery. So he stabbed himself with his spear and hanged himself from a limb of Yggdrasil that hung over the Well of Erd. He was there for 9 days and nights, refusing help from the other gods. He had no food or water. On the final day, the runes recognized his self-sacrifice and revealed their meanings in the depths of the water below. Time, fate, and destiny of Norse beliefs. Similarly to other people of the time, time was seen as cyclical rather than linear. It wasn't seen as a timeline like many people view it today. Instead, it was seen as always in a process of renewal. As the present fades, it becomes the new past, meaning the past is never the same. They also viewed the present as having an impact on the future. They didn't view the future as separate from the past or present. Norns are female giants that are said to weave the tapestry of fate that all humans and gods are intertwined with. There were 3 Norns that tended Yggdrasil, and they were the most influential to the universe. Erd, what once was, Verdandi, what is coming into being, and Skuld, what shall be. But another translation for Skuld is that which should be, because the future isn't concrete until it's the present. The Norse view of time allowed for people to have some control over their lives. This makes divination through runes worthwhile because why look into the future if you can't change it? The many meanings of runes. Runes are incredibly complex. First of all, each rune has multiple meanings. There is the literal translation of the runic symbol's name. The rune Ewaz is the word for horse. But for divination purposes, there are different meanings. In divination, Ewaz symbolizes trust and loyalty because those traits are needed for the bond between horse and rider. Let's be honest, the ABCs could be in any order. It really doesn't matter. The same cannot be said for the runic alphabet. The organization is very complex and thought out. First of all, there are 3 Ets named after the god associated with the first rune of the group. Each Et contains 8 runes. Freyr's Et is associated with the forces of creation, Hagel's is with the forces of disruption and change, and Tyr's with the divine forces and how they relate to the human experience. The positions of the runes do matter. Each rune coincides with the rune in the same position of the other Ets. For example, the 2nd rune in each Et symbolizes strength. In the 3rd Et, it actually means childbirth, but who's gonna tell their mom that that doesn't take strength? Some rune masters also say that runes are connected to the runes that come before and after them in the Et. The runic alphabet changed a lot during its development. Different dialects had sounds that others did not, so runes had to be added to represent the sounds. Some runes were even omitted. The Northern Italic language helped the runic script form a threat to Christianity. As with all other religions, Germanic paganism was seen as a threat to Christianity. In the Middle Ages, runes were banned due to their magic and divination uses. In the 1600s, Scandinavians wanted to research their history, and because it was seen as only an academic inquiry, it was not seen as a threat. But this research helped to bring about the Volkisch movement of the late 1800s. The Volkisch movement was the predecessor of Nazis. This movement was the German efforts to bring back the German race by rejecting Christianity in favor of paganism by using Scandinavian mythology and culture as a guide. This movement was seen by Hitler, and as the country had begun thinking Germanic descent was superior, it was easier for him to take over and convince the populace that genocide was in order to bring back the original nation. The movement indicated that glory was genetic, and the modern Nordic people were living embodiments of Vikings. What the fuck even is Aryans? I'm going to be honest. Going into this, all I really knew about Aryans was that it was an attempt to bring back the superior white race. But what it really was Helena Petrovna Blavatsky, who created the Theosophical Society, also wrote The Secret Doctrine, which was about the different historical civilizations and races. Of course, the most intelligent and superior race being the Atlanteans? Yes, the lost city of Atlantis, Atlanteans. She wrote that they rose to power about 4,500,000 years ago, which is about 2 million years before the Homo habilis, which is the first recognized representative of the human genus. Herrenrase is the idea that the Aryan race is the root race for the Nordic people, meaning the Nordic people are descendants from Atlanteans, meaning they are genetically superior. Guido von List wrote the book The Secret of Runes, and the way he came about his interpretations was by going blind from cataract surgery for like a year, and he thought, my suffering, 100% equal to Odin's self-mutilation, so the runes revealed their meanings to me. And I'm gonna call them the Armanen runes. Nazis will use these later, but I'm cool with it because I helped pioneer Armanianism, which is the idea of Aryan purity.
A quick side note, here are two other people that had their own interpretation books.
The first English interpretation book was released in 1983 by the author Ralph Blum. He used Christianity in East Asia to help interpret the runes' meanings, because obviously these groups influenced pagan Scandinavia divination practices. A year later, Edred Thorson released an interpretation book and actually used the cultural framework of pagan Scandinavia for his definitions. Nazis used runes, but they also altered them. They used 2 Sig, or Sowila runes, instead of 1, and they used von List's interpretation of victory. So they used it to mean double victory, but as we learned earlier, using runes incorrectly can yield bad results. So double victory turned into a double defeat. The Volkisch movement of today. David Lane had an incredible impact on today's white supremacist groups. He created the 14-word slogan, "We must secure the existence of our people and a future for white children," as well as the 88 precepts which are used by many supremacist groups. He believed that a period of oppressive dictatorship was needed to get a Wotanist or Odin society. Steve McNallen founded the Asatru Folk Assembly. He believes that micro-societies are needed in order to preserve race and combat white genocide, which is of course just a supremacist made-up excuse to permit racism. So we know the Asatru Folk Assembly is racist. But is it sexist too? Yes, completely. At best, women are vessels for creating genetic purity and unity? Believing feminism goes against the natural order, this group pushes for harsh gender roles. McNallen stated that males are designed to capture females, and that nothing makes a woman happier than to be desired by a great warrior. Yeah, because that's what I want, a creep chasing me talking about me being a vessel for purity. And what about homophobia? Yeah, they openly stated that they do not accept LGBT members. I found the Asatru Folk Assembly website, and I'm not sure why, but they chose runestone.org as their website instead of including their name. They also tried to pull an I'm not racist card by saying they promote diversity, but not interracial mingling. They are against cultural Marxism, and believe that all races have their own religions and cultures, but they should not be mixed with others. These neo-Volkisch groups have had an intense impact on inclusive heathenry. Many symbols are now associated with white supremacist groups, including Mjolnir, Thor's hammer, and this is a crucial symbol to the religion, and it's commonly used in both inclusive and supremacist groups. So if you have a tattoo or pendant of Mjolnir or runes, people may think you're a neo-Nazi. If inclusive heathenry wasn't having enough trouble, the capital insurrection sure solved that. People are seen storming the capital dressed like Vikings and covered in Norse symbols like the Celtic knot, Yggdrasil, Thor's hammer, and runes. This very vocal group of white supremacists just had to find another way to tie heathenry with racism, didn't they? This time by tying it with Trump supporters. I was once talking to somebody about Proud Boys, and they said the group shouldn't be taken seriously because it's just a group of immature men pushing each other around while reciting cereal names. But the Ku Klux Klan wasn't originally taken seriously due to the strangeness of the group, having ranks called wizards. But we know how that turned out! And there are Proud Boys who were seen wearing a 6 million wasn't enough t-shirt. How in the 9 realms do we combat hate and take back heathenry from the white supremacists? One way that sounds easy, but due to ignorance and an unwillingness to learn, is through education and using history to our advantage. Vikings were not a race or a culture. Viking is just a title for a seafaring warrior, so they were pretty much just pirates. Being white was not a requirement to be a Viking, and not all Vikings were. DNA evidence shows high ethnic exchange, as when they traveled they would take wives and slaves from other nations. Vikings were successful because they were easily able to adapt and embrace other cultures instead of trying to conserve their own. Another way to show the majority of heathens are against hate is by groups banding together to condemn discrimination. Heathens Against Hate is just one of the many groups that are trying to cut the ties between heathenry and white supremacy. Declaration 127 was established in order to show how the majority of heathen communities condemn racism. Globally, organizations are signing on to this. It declares that their organization is separate from the Asatru Folk Assembly, and it does not condone or practice the same morals or values. It specifies this group because it's the largest neo-Volkish group. Recently, Declaration 127 has allowed for individuals and not just groups to sign on to it. Another way to combat hate is by providing in-reach to prison. The Troth is an organization that goes into prisons to try and help those interested in heathenism stay out of Aryan groups. Showing any interest in the Germanic religion could be dangerous because it would make the supremacist groups try to recruit you. Just saying the word Odin would make hundreds of Aryan pamphlets fly at you. Another way that could help corporations with love. There's a This Hammer Smashes Fascism t-shirt with a Mjolnir design. I love it, I bought it. Wearing clothing is pretty easy to do. Most people wear shirts except for that guy who stormed the Capitol. So wearing these types of clothing and t-shirts would help show that people can be heathens and not white supremacists.